Great, thanks, Kate. So I am going to introduce my, God, that's a bit low down, isn't it? I have to sit on the edge. So let me introduce my distinguished guest here, Claude Ruibal, who's a global head of sports content for Google YouTube. You know, it is difficult to follow Lord Coe, even harder to follow Ward Platt. But you know, I mean, Google is a big part of my life. But quite frankly, I don't really, when I think of Google, I think of sport. You know, I don't need you, do I? Why do I need you?
So, great question. We sort of have three objectives we try and focus on at Google and at YouTube too, which is one of them is focus on the user. How can we help users, in this case fans, how can we help them around sport? Two is just do a few things well, don't try and do everything. Mm-hmm. And three is, and kind of the mantra of the company is, you know, help make information accessible and help organize that information so it's useful. When it comes to sport, I got to Google about 4 years ago. I was brought in to do more in sport on YouTube. And YouTube, as you know, started as a fan-uploaded site. So there was content uploaded from someone watching TV or someone who was taking a picture of, in the case when I was there, their dog and cat on a skateboard. And that was most of what the sports were 4 years ago. And the other sports that were on there, either the rights holders like Fox or the rights holders themselves like English Premier League were saying, you're violating our copyright, this is an infringement, we don't like this. So we had to work through that to show how could we add value to users, rights holders, broadcasters, and to your question, a good example of how we think sport is relevant for you and for others is just in search itself. During the World Cup, there were 30-odd plus days of World Cup competition, and if you did a search in most countries of the world, not every country of the world, if you did a search just the words World Cup or Brazil versus Germany or whatever it might be, and let's say most of us can't see everything live these days. We miss things. Mm-hmm. There's too many opportunities to things, but we have this mobile device that allows us to kind of, anywhere we go, be able to interact and access information. So if you just did a search World Cup, what would come up on top of all the search results was something we called One Box. And it would have the results of that match, if you missed it. Mm-hmm. If the match was going on at that point in time, there actually would be a score that was relevant to that point in time in the match. But in addition to that, we surfaced specific clips around each goal, each red card, and each yellow card, a video clip within the results themselves that allowed people to catch up, to actually see what was happening. But while this provided great information for a number of users, someone like yourself might not have even thought to do that because maybe you had another destination that you would go
Absolutely.
to more traditionally, be it the BBC iPlayer, or if you're in the USA, maybe it's ESPN.com.
Yeah.
What we found, though, were there were a lot of people that didn't know where to go. And you're saying, how is that possible?
Yeah.
How is that possible? But I don't know what it's like for you, but I know when certain events take place that I want to see, be it Wimbledon, be it the US Open tennis, be it golf, a lot of the time I have no idea where to go to see these things. It's somewhat frustrating because the broadcasters are changing. If you just think about Europe today, there's 400 niche broadcast sports channels, just sports channels across all of Europe. 400, think about that. And they're all starting, you've got beIN Sport, you've got other cable channels across Europe. And frankly, they're getting rights that before the traditional free-to-air broadcasters had. So it's really a search problem today to try and find where you can find the sport that you want to watch. So in the One Box, we also always give information about where you can see the broadcast, and we link off to where there's a live streaming broadcast, if in fact there is such a thing in your market.
So okay, you sort of convinced me that actually it's kind of difficult to find things these days, or it's a bit more difficult, right? Because broadcasters do sort of rights go here, and where is the 5 Nations, 6 Nations rugby this year?
Right.
Is a good question. I kind of get that, but if you're a passionate fan, you know. So, I mean, the passionate fan, which is presumably the most valuable fan, already knows. They don't need that, do they? They don't need the search?
I think we're totally okay with that because we're trying to help. There are lots of passionate fans that don't know where to go. I would just argue that point with you, okay? And they might live in Madagascar, they might live in Singapore, they might live in a number of countries, and they just don't necessarily know, or they don't even have access to a broadcast of something that they're passionate about. They may be an expat and they grew up with cricket, or they may be an expat and they grew up with American football, the NFL. And frankly, they just don't know where to find these things. So we try to sort of fill those cracks of all that unduplicated audience who actually doesn't know or doesn't have the app or doesn't know where to go find these things. And there's quite a high number of them. I mean, I can't tell you how many times the one box surfaced during the 30-odd days of the World Cup, but it's a big number. And we think that's an unduplicated audience that is looking to try and find where this information. And it's relatively easy to do. If you took an example of, if you're in the USA and you had either the ESPN football and soccer app in the USA, or you wanted to go to the ESPN.com soccer site, to actually find that same set of clips, in some cases it was 6 or 7 clicks away. So it wasn't necessarily so easy. With search, you just could put in World Cup and you would actually have a timeline going back from the very first match to the present match that was taking place. You could go back and look at things that had happened in the past and create relevance for yourself.
So, okay, that plays to, I guess, the Google strength of search, right?
Right.
But if we think beyond search, because I suppose we get that, I'll kind of give it to you. But what else are you doing to really just enrich the experience?
Sure.
Because, I mean, search alone is, whatever, right?
Great question. So let's talk about YouTube now as opposed to Google. So as I said, when I got there, mostly dogs and cats on skateboards and kids
They're still there.
Of parents doing amazing tricks, whatever that might be, and lots of other stuff. So we started initially, our team focused on how could we do more with football. We thought that was a truly global sport. There was interest in that sport in just about every country of the world. There were interest in sports brands of certain teams all around the world, but generally a lot of passion around this. So we started going out to many of the big football leagues, La Liga in Spain, the French league, the Italian league, Serie A, and talked to them about how could we provide more value to users and at the same time not interfere with their existing broadcast and distribution relationships, because we always want to be additive to the ecosystem. How can we add value to the user and to the existing distributors? Contrary to the discussion earlier with Ward at Fox, and just to be clear, we're not a rights buyer.
I think we know that.
Okay, we're a distributor of content, and that's really our key focus. We have over 1 billion uniques a month. We have over 6 billion hours of content viewed every month on YouTube. So we think we can amplify sport through that. And the way we do it, and the way we've done it with football as an example, is working with all these leagues. They understood and realized there wasn't always a great destination in their country or outside their home country to find catch-up content highlights. And the consumer mindset we've really tried to work on and how we work with our rights holders and broadcasters is that if you missed it live, if you missed the long-form event live, and I'd venture to say in the course of the World Cup, you probably missed a few games that you wanted to see. Maybe not, but I think most people did. If you missed it live, we want you to know that you can go to YouTube to find that catch-up content. And within that catch-up content, we also, and it's usually either a channel that's run by the broadcaster partner we have or a channel run by the league. Within that catch-up content, all of our partners can put annotations within the video itself at the end or a card that can point to other places, their specific URL, where the user can go to go deeper, to get more information, to find out more about what happened at that event. So again, always trying to be additive, trying to create some organization around, if I miss something, here's where I can go to find the details.
So, I mean, are you therefore doing deals with, say, FIFA around the World Cup? Where is the sort of the commercial transaction?
So FIFA is a good example. They're relatively new to our platform, but they are on our platform. They were actively involved in our platform during World Cup. In fact, they powered that one box I spoke about with the clips and highlights, their clips and highlights. And they couldn't do it in every market, but let's say the majority of the world's markets, they retained rights to have near-in-time clips and highlights after the game, so that it didn't violate their broadcast agreements or existing distribution agreements in a lot of key markets. But FIFA, another unique attribute about YouTube is, as I started out, we're about fans uploading content of things they love, whatever it might be. And when it comes to sport, many fans will, believe it or not, download from the TV broadcast, edit that download, and put it on their channel on YouTube, and then through social media tell all their friends, guess what I just put up on my channel on YouTube? Come and watch this. This is a really great summary of X. And a good example of this would be after Ronaldo won the Golden Boot at the FIFA Awards in January, literally the next day, a user who had a channel put on his channel a summary of all 69 goals that Ronaldo had done that year and all 17 assists. Now, La Liga, who owns the rights to that, could have licensed and put that same set of content up, but guess what? They didn't think of doing that. And this was a really amazing summary clip, which I watched the whole thing. It was only like 6 minutes long, but you were like, here you could see the justification for the Golden Boot, and you could just, in a very short time, capture everything you want to watch. And now you're probably thinking, well, isn't that violating the rights holders' agreements?
Did cross my mind.
Isn't that a problem? Why is that able to happen? Well, the unique attribute that we have on YouTube is that we have a software system called Content ID. It's identification of content when it's uploaded onto the platform. And with Content ID, all of our rights holder partners give us the live stream of any event that they have. And with that live stream, we're able to then match any fan uploaded content from TV. And with that match, we're able to give the copyright control to the rights holder. So any monetization that takes place with that licensed content goes to the rights holder. So the fan can still be a passionate fan and show their friends what they've created around something they love. And at the same time, the rights holder can control fan-uploaded content. And the rights holder can either decide to leave it up and monetize it, they can decide just to track it and not monetize it, or they can decide to take it down. So it's really within their control as to what they want to do. But it's a key differentiator for the platform because suddenly now there are so many more clips and highlights that are very valuable and interesting that can be monetized that the rights holder themselves wouldn't even think of creating or have the capacity to create with the workforce they have.
So, I mean, maybe sort of touching on this, you know, when we listen to different players in the ecosystem, eventually they all say, oh, and I'm giving back to sport, right? Yeah, I'm using sport, but I give back.
Right.
What's Google giving back? What's YouTube giving back?
Well, I think it's the whole thing. You miss something live, we'll give you a highlight.
Yeah. No, that's giving it back to the fan. What are you giving back to the sport? Because without that sport, you wouldn't have a super fan, right? What are you giving back?
Well, obviously one key component is revenue. So the user uploaded content, the licensed content is all monetized. Another good example of revenue is around football, as I talked about. We were successful in aggregating most major leagues in the world, all of their games, all of their highlights. And because football is so global, and because fanship around football is not necessarily just team-specific Chelsea, or not just player-specific Costa, not a bad player, nice hat trick last weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
But guess what? Costa's followed in other countries too. And people that follow him aren't Chelsea fans, they're Costa fans. So what we found with football was that it's very global in its consumption and not country specific. Sure, with a lot of leagues, a majority of viewership is within that country itself, but for a lot of leagues, a good piece of it still is outside that country. So what we allow to have happen is the ability to provide in football now an ongoing, always-on destination for soccer. We don't have all the scores and results, and a lot of the sports sites have that. But if you're a soccer fan, you can capture and follow all of the players you love, the teams you love. And what that also then delivers on the revenue side is that advertisers, sponsors, and let's take an example of Adidas, who's an official sponsor of the World Cup. Traditionally, by the time the World Cup was over in the past, their share of voice was often lower than Nike's share of voice because Nike was really good at creating amazing videos to essentially ambush that sponsor relationship. What Adidas decided to do this time was to create an ongoing dialogue with consumers through YouTube 6 months before the World Cup, leveraging all the football content we had on the platform, and took a big piece of that share of voice, all the football views across all the different leagues, including FIFA. And it allowed them to communicate their brands, their product, through the entire 6-month lead-up period prior to World Cup. And what they found at the end of World Cup is actually they had a better share of voice, a higher share of voice for the first time. It was very successful to solidify in the consumer's mind that, you know, here's a very powerful brand and here's the official brand, the official sponsor that's associated with that event. So revenue to the rights holders, revenue to the broadcasters, and great opportunities for brands to build their awareness around their relationship with sport.
I take all that. I'm not sure you've answered my question.
Okay.
What are you giving back to sport? What are you doing to create investment in sports infrastructure, into sports? What are you doing at a grassroots level?
Great question. I couldn't have asked it better.
Well, maybe you'll answer it. I can ask the question. He's going to answer it.
We did not prepare this ahead of time, trust me. So one of our core initiatives, well, let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question? It's okay if I turn the table?
Yeah.
Have you ever gone to YouTube to learn how to do something? If you say no, you're the only one in the room that says no.
I know everything. Yes, of course I have.
Thank you. So coaching, training, fitness, key vertical around sports. Key vertical around sports for us with amazing growth right now. In fact, 2 years ago, we went and worked with a company called New Line. It's a big theatrical company. And they had a whole set of content that they had traditionally distributed through paid DVDs. Buy this DVD and you can get Jillian's workout. And they were saying, this just doesn't seem to work anymore. It seems like things have changed. Why don't we think about putting all that content, all this archived content, onto the YouTube platform and make it accessible there, get it ad-supported, and see if that works. And guess what? They are now one of our top 10 sports channels globally, just around fitness and across all the sports channels we have, the leagues, everything else. And so what we've seen happening now is this huge momentum around, one, there's just a bias to be more fit today. When I used to go running in London in the 70s and 80s, I mean, there was no burnt track around Hyde Park. I mean, today it's very clear. I mean, think about just bicyclists in London. I mean, you know, almost non-existent 20 years ago.
Nightmare.
Now everyone's fighting with the bicyclists and the cars and the buses.
I blame Boris Johnson.
Well, there you go. But I love it. But I think there's such a move to, you know, thinking about, you know, in sort of my reason for being and around why I'm motivated to do what I do is I strongly believe that being active, staying healthy makes you smarter, lets you live longer. It's just generally good for you. And being able to influence that through passion around sport and through all the fitness training, coaching things we do, I think is immensely valuable and important.
Do you invest as a brand in sort of local sports associations? Do you sponsor local sports? How do you use your marketing money?
So, again, we don't sponsor per se. We have rev share agreements. We find the advertisers in most cases for a lot of our sports partners, and we discover revenue for a lot of our sports partners, both locally within small countries, larger countries, and in large regional areas. But an example of efforts we've done in the USA, we've been very involved in high school sports, and it's fairly regional or specific. So high school football in Texas, I mean, there's nothing bigger. But high school football and basketball generally across the country are pretty powerful sports. So we've worked very hard to have the live events on YouTube and to have all the archived events on YouTube. And then, you know, mom and dad who has a busy schedule may not be able to see their son or daughter play, but I know because both my kids are athletes, there's no more stressful thing for me to watch than to watch my kid competing. And there's no more thing that I would hate missing the most is seeing my kids competing. In fact, my daughter was in a volleyball tournament when I flew over here the other day, and I missed the whole day of volleyball. But I can go catch up, and now I can go see her. And the important part about that is now I can write her an email and say, hey, that was a great middle kill you got in the third game, really excited, you jumped really high, you got around the block. And then she feels like I'm touching her and having some relationship with her even though I'm away.
Okay, so let me poke you a little bit more on this. If you take advertising, right, from, let's say, a brand in Indonesia, right, are you investing money back in Indonesian sport?
Well, I would argue yes, because we're obviously showing Indonesian sport. We're showing, I don't know what you would describe as Indonesian sport, but we have lots of badminton on YouTube. We have live badminton on YouTube. In fact, the Badminton World Federation has determined one of their principal live distribution outlets is on YouTube, where they have powerful deals with local broadcasters. We geo-block, because again, we're trying to be additive, not cannibalize or competitive.
Yep.
Where they do not, which is in a lot of countries of the world, we stream live directly and provide a signal and then provide revenue back to the Badminton World Federation that frankly they could or probably couldn't have gotten with a local broadcast deal in those countries. A lot of times there's certainly an opportunity to get a local broadcast deal with a distributor in some of these smaller countries, and they may get a reasonable fee for that. But oftentimes that comes with the impediment of limited distribution because it might be a startup cable channel that has 5, 10, 15% distribution across the country. At least our view is live streaming is relatively accessible to a big piece of the audience. So at least there's a better chance to have more people see your sport and to grow your sport that way.
Yeah. You said, I think you joined Google 4 years ago?
Yes.
When you look back 4 years and you think of what you wanted to achieve, is there anything you haven't yet achieved or that has disappointed you on that 4-year journey?
No disappointments, but I'm very sort of positive in my orientation about things. So lots of challenges, but no disappointments. What I'd still like to achieve, well, two things I'd personally still like to achieve and have our team achieve. We're already doing some of it, but I'd like to see more of it. Mm-hmm. One is what I describe as longer tail sports, being able to have more live content distribution on our platform. And to feel comfortable that if they do that, they can create and develop global investment by brands around the sport, even though it's not distributed by specific broadcasters in specific countries. And we've had some good success with surfing around that. There's something called the Association of Surfing Professionals. A team of individuals a year ago decided that tour of surfers should be better aggregated. It used to be a discrete number of events all around the world, in some cases supported by Billabong here and someone else here. So they aggregated all the events. They created a tour with points, not too distinct from Formula One racing, that people could then follow throughout the season. Makes a lot of sense. And they went out and talked to different broadcasters about, would you be willing to show this live in our country and so forth and so forth. In a lot of cases, I think the broadcasters had real interest, but they had limited bandwidth to be able to do that on their channels. Because, again, it's a 24/7, I can fill what I can fill, and you're not going to get prime time because I've got other things that are going to drive a higher rating than surfing. So you might get 1 to 2 in the morning, or you might get some time on the weekends. And surfing's relatively unique in that it can go for 8 days long, but they may only surf for a few hours each day. So it's kind of hard. You can't just say it's going to happen from this 2-hour period. So that became a really good solution for the ASP. And what's come of it, though, which I've been really excited about, is they've had really, really high audience growth. We do models with our strategic team before we do all these deals. And this is one of the few that's just exceeded the most optimistic model we've had. But what they've also been able to do is to find relationships with global brands, in this case Samsung, to be sort of the global sponsor of the tour. And so they've been able to do one-stop shopping across the world with some key brands. And I'm really thinking they're going to continue to have great success. And then so more live would be great for those that can take advantage of it. And the other piece for me that we're really trying to move forward on is creating a dual revenue stream opportunity for our rights holders, where an example would be, there's something called the Pac-12, which is an aggregation of most of the West Coast colleges, Stanford, UCLA, USC, a few others. And they have a season of football and basketball and Olympic sports. And they have actually one main channel in the USA where they distribute, but they also have 6 other channels that are very regional specific for each college. They looked to us and said, we're doing great in the domestic USA. Lots of distribution, lots of production capability. We think we've got that all figured out. We don't really need to look to augment on that other than catch up on YouTube. But internationally, we're a little bit lost. No one really wants to show the big game, Cal Berkeley versus Stanford in Singapore. It's just the audience is too small. Yeah. But we think that distributing that product, a high quality product on YouTube for a subscription fee and letting that be available outside the USA could really help us. You'll probably touch more people than we could have if we just put in our own URL because you have such a large audience base. So why don't we try and distribute that outside the USA as a pay offering? They can still run advertising on it, so you can create dual revenue streams. So they've launched for this season with us. It's still early stage, but seeing the success around that and using, so you'll probably ask, well, how do you market that effectively in Singapore? I mean, you've got lots of audience, but what are you doing to market it? Well, I hate to go back to where I started, but it's all about this free funnel of content that sits on the platform already. So all the fan-uploaded content around the Pac-12 and the one-box piece that I spoke about, where in search results, if you just put in a search for a Pac-12 game, UCLA versus whatever, you'll get that search results with the video, with the ability to find where to go see it. And in this case, if you did that in certain countries, you just click right to the live stream opportunity, and you can then subscribe for it. And we think that's a pretty effective marketing tool to help at least get this going. It's still early stage, but I think seeing how we can do more of that would be really important.
Okay, so the question I'm going to ask, but you're not going to answer because we've got a panel coming up in a shorter time. I was going to ask, though, what do you want to achieve in this part of the world that you haven't already? We can talk about that on the globalization panel because I think it's a nice fit. But we are actually at timeout right now. So
all right.
I'd like to ask all of you to thank Claude for his insight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.